All right, so today we are taking a look at the quadratic formula. And we got to note that the quadratic formula is just another way to solve quadratic equations if we can't factor or maybe we forget how to complete the square. The quadratic formula always works. And the quadratic formula is really derived from completing the square. So that is what we're going to start off by taking a look at. So the quadratic formula. Say that we have some quadratic equation set equal to 0. We have ax squared plus bx plus c is equal to 0. Okay, then we can use the quadratic formula. It's going to be some x equals, and we can solve and get our answers. All right, and what is x equal to then? So, like I said, let's use completing the square in order to prove the quadratic formula or solve what really is the quadratic formula. So the first thing I'm going to do is subtract c over to the other side. So I have ax squared plus bx is equal to negative c. All right, then I know I want the coefficient of my x squared to be 1, so I'll factor out an a, and factoring out is really the same as dividing each of these terms by an a. So I'm left with x squared plus b over a x, and that's equal to negative c. All right, let's just divide that a over so we can have the x squared and x terms alone on the left side. So we have x squared plus b over ax equals negative c divided by a. All right, then to complete the square, I am going to divide b over a by 2, which is the same thing as b over 2a. Then I'll square it and add it to each side. So that's b squared over 4a squared. I need to add that to both sides. So I have x squared plus b over a x plus b squared over 4a squared equals negative c over a plus b squared over 4a squared. Whew, a little tiring there. All right, let's take the left side and let's just write that as a square. So that is now x plus b over 2a squared. And that's equal to negative c divided by a plus b squared over 4a squared. Well, before I go ahead and I extract those square roots, what I'm going to want to do is get a common denominator on my right side. So my left side I'll keep the same, x plus b over 2a squared, excuse me, is equal to, well, I know that my common denominator is going to be 4a squared, so I need to multiply my left fraction, this negative ca, I'm going to multiply that by 4a over 4a. That gives me negative 4ac over 4a squared plus b squared over 4a squared. Okay, we have a common denominator, so now we can simplify just by adding those together. So we get negative 4ac plus b squared, and I could actually rewrite that so it looks like b squared minus 4ac. Okay, if you remember what the quadratic formula is, you might see it starting to come together, all over 4a squared. All right, now I'm going to extract the square roots. So take the square root of each side. I have x plus b over 2a equals the square root of everything on the right side, b squared minus 4ac all over 4a squared. And I remember, all right, well, if I have the square root of two things divided by each other, that's just the square root of the numerator divided by the square root of the denominator. So x plus b over 2a equals, and one thing that I forgot, geez, what am I doing? I forgot that positive or negative sign. All right, so that's equal to the positive or negative square root of b squared minus 4ac all over the square root of 4a squared. Well, the square root of 4a squared is just 2a. So now I have x plus b over 2a equals the positive or negative square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And then I just subtract the b over 2a. So I get x equals negative b over 2a plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Now I've got one step left. I'm just going to erase this first step and I'm going to write it in black. Okay, here you just combine, right? If they have a common denominator, you can add them together. So that is x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So that is how we develop the quadratic formula. All right, that is the quadratic formula, and I've written it in big letters on this next screen. Okay, x is equal to negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And you can actually sing this along to the tune of Pop Goes the Weasel. Okay, that might help you to remember it because it's important to remember. Unless you want to spend all your time completing the square, which you are more than welcome to do that. But the quadratic formula is x, and I'll sing this. I'll even sing this for you guys to the tune of Pop Goes the Weasel. It's x is equal to negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. All right, so singing that tune in your head might help you to remember it. All right, so this is the problem that we did last time with completing the square. We are just going to use the quadratic formula to solve it. So we need everything on one side, have it equal to 0. So I'll subtract everything from the right. So I have 4x squared minus 20x plus 17 is equal to 0. Now let's just use that quadratic formula, which hopefully you've remembered. Okay, I'm not expecting you to have already memorized it, but soon you will. Negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So I'll just plug in. Well, a is equal to 4, b is equal to negative 20, my c is equal to 17. So I get x is equal to negative 20 is positive 20 plus or minus the square root of 20 squared is 400 minus 4 times 4 times 17. Okay, 8 times 17, let's see, that's 136, I believe. We'll get there in a second, though. And then all over 2a, so that's 8. All right, so far so good. So we're at 20 plus or minus the square root of 8 times 17, we said was 136. So 400 minus 136 divided by 8. Let's see, 400 minus 136 is 264. All right, 264, is that correct? Am I doing this right? Oh my goodness, I said 8 times 17. That's not 8 times 17, we need 16 times 17. What a fool I am. All right, we do 16 times 17 quickly. That's going to give us 200. Wait, I just did 8 times 17 was 136, so that's 272, right? So this should be 128. Okay, 128 here. My apologies, guys. That's embarrassing, right? 16 times 17 is 232. There we go. And the square root of 128, we can simplify that, right? That's the square root of 64 times the square root of 2. So that's 8 root 2. So I get x equals 20 plus or minus 8 root 2 over 8. Let's divide both of these by 8. So that's 20 over 8 plus or minus 8. 8 root 2 divided by 8 is just root 2. And then let's just simplify. Both of those are divisible by 5. So we get, divisible by 4. 20 divided by 4 gives me 5. So 5 halves plus or minus the square root of 2. All right, and that is our final answer for x. X is equal to 5 halves plus or minus the square root of 2. So that is the quadratic formula. You don't necessarily need to know how to prove the quadratic formula. However, you do need to have it memorized. If you plan to use it, it must be memorized. It will not be given to you on an equation sheet. Hope this helped, and best of luck solving quadratic equations.